walk across a college campus today, I feel the weight of tradition all around, reminding me of where higher education has come from. But I also feel something else: urgency, change, disruption. Students are asking new questions, faculty are rethinking their roles, society is demanding more from our institutions. At the heart of all of this change is one pressing question: what does it mean to be an educated person in today's world? Welcome to Think Forward with Rose, the podcast for higher education leaders and change makers, those ready to embrace disruption, rethink what's possible, and move our academic sector forward. I'm your host, Marie Sloan, an advocate for students and for the leaders who serve them. Each week, I sit down with people shaping the future of higher education, sharing real stories, fresh perspectives, and lessons to help us all lead with purpose in these times of change. Today, that conversation continues with Dr. Thaddeus Gulbrandsen, Dean of Sciences and Humanities at Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston. Thad brings deep insight into engaged learning and the way colleges and universities can remain true to their purpose while adapting to a changing world. Together, we'll explore what makes students thrive, what it means to lead in these times of disruptions, and how a higher education can reimagine its future. Where tradition meets transformation, this is Think Forward. Welcome, Thad.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is a great conversation and a great question that's being posed. But before we get into that, I'd really like to talk about you. Let's start this conversation there. Your career spans research, teaching, and leadership across many contexts. So before we dive in, let's talk about your own journey. You've held leadership roles across research centers, universities, and now you're the Dean of Science and Humanities. So looking back, what moments most shaped your leadership journey?
Well, I think it all started, when I first found myself on university campuses as an undergraduate, or actually even before that, as a high school student. And I just immediately fell in love with the whole higher education space. That, I was kind of blown away as a first generation kid who, found myself on a campus that was just devoted to making the world better through teaching, through research, through advancing the frontiers of knowledge, through community service. And I thought, what a great place this is. And I just, I decided that this was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to contribute to that. And so I pursued graduate studies and the role of a faculty member, and I made a fairly early career pivot to administration, research administration, because while I found that I really loved the solitary work of a scholar, I also really loved the collaborative spaces that exist on campus. And I just, I wanted to do more of that. I wanted to find myself in places where I was collaborating with other people, supporting other people in their work, whether it's students or other faculty or members of the community that we serve. And so that set me on this university administrative trajectory that has been really rewarding. And I'm grateful for having a career where I can work with people who are trying to become their best selves and trying to do best.
Trying to become your best self. Such a positive yet very proactive way of thinking, putting yourself right there at the center. I want to go back to something that you said. You said as a first generation student, in your role as dean, I know that you work with first generation faculty members. You also work with others that are first generation students that appear on your campus. How has your background helped you relate to what they're experiencing?
I think, reflecting on my own journey, it makes me realize that, well, let's see, that's a good question. I think it makes me realize that people are on different journeys. People have different relationships to a university, and that being a good mentor and that, the relationship between faculty and student, that mentorship relationship is really the heart of higher education. Being a good mentor is trying to understand the journey that the student is on,
Yeah.
and sort of letting them sort of ask questions and not take for granted. It's easy, like the longer we're in higher education, the more we take for granted all the things.
Yeah.
But I think back to there was a critical moment in my undergraduate career where one of my mentors handed me a book that was called Strangers in Paradise.
Huh.
And it's about first generation kids finding their way in higher education. And I had this epiphany moment. I sort of opened the book and was reading the table of contents and flipping out. Oh, and all of a sudden I said, oh, I get it. Yeah, this is really important. And so understanding that students they have their own discovery, their own sort of voyage of discovery that's happening on campuses. They're learning and finding their place and figuring out how they relate to others, and is something that I always try to remember.
I see you as such a relator and someone who can understand what someone else is going through, maybe needing more information from them, but knowing the way to get that information from them based on your journey. And so your journey really raises a powerful question about what higher education is really for in today's world. And so what does it mean to be an educated person in today's environment?
Well, I think we're facing a lot of pressure in society right now, particularly in the whole American political scene, where there's a lot of pressure to focus on work preparation. That sort of singular, like making sure that there's the return on investment for students. And that's certainly important, but it doesn't need to be done at the expense of a broader education. That, students need to have some knowledge and awareness and some capacity in critical information literacy, in being able to assess arguments and being able to communicate and understand their place in the world, that they're part of something bigger. And in the end, our students were going to go on to lives where they're not just employees, they're members of communities and friends and family. And, we all serve all these different roles. And I think part of being an educated person involves all of those things. But it's interesting because this is a question that at the beginning of this semester, each academic year, we have a different theme that we focus on.
Yeah.
In my school, in the School of Sciences and Humanities. And AI and everything that it represents, generative AI, is hugely disruptive and brings a lot of challenges and opportunities to us. And we have been involved in this conversation at Wentworth in the School of Sciences and Humanities that goes back to when ChatGPT landed in November of 2022, and we had a big faculty forum in January of 2023, and started to think about all the tools and all the things that students could use and we could use, and what does this mean for us, and what does this mean for our education, and after having this conversation for a couple years, we finally, or this year, we've landed on this topic of acknowledging that we are grappling with a redefinition of what it means to be an educated person and what students need to learn. How do we know that the students are making progress? How do we grade it? How do we assess learning when students are using generative AI tools to write their work? And so I think all of those tried and true concepts that I just laid out earlier, it's about job preparation, but not only job preparation, it's about being a well-rounded person and a critical connoisseur of information. But it's also to be determined. Where it remains an open question. I think we're actively redefining that right now.
I, for one, am really happy that's the question that's being challenged, that's being debated on your campus. And my hope is that that question is being posed on many other colleges and university campuses as well. Thinking in terms of, is it about a degree and a credential, or is it about a life of meaning and purpose and value to a community? Can it be both? Is it both? And so as you and your colleagues struggle with this question, how has the conversation shifted over time from where you started to where you are now?
Well, I think that some things have shifted and some things have stayed the same. Okay. Any time in life, whether we're talking about work or any aspect of our life, when we encounter some major disruption, something that challenges us, it's important to go back to those core values. Mm-hmm. and to say, okay, well, how does this relate to that core value, that core trajectory that we're on? And so I think AI is a great example of that. Faculty were trying to decide, there are a lot of debates about what is cheating, what is academic integrity, how do we make sure that students know things that they need to know? And it's really easy for us to take an institution-focused perspective on that, and what is expedient, what are kind of the policies that we need to implement to keep everybody in line, kind of. Mm-hmm. But if we step back and say, okay, well, what are we here for? Especially at my institution, the purpose of our work here is to support students in their educational journey. And it's not, so if any time a faculty member, if the debate that we're having ends up gravitating toward faculty hiding little traps in an assignment so that they can catch, I'll put this in the assignment, and then if the student cheats, then I'll catch them. And, so I want to say, well, is that really the relationship that we want to have with our students? If we're supporting them on their journey of learning and growing and becoming an educated person, a university educated person, that involves trust and mentorship. And do we really want to be hiding in the bushes down the path, waiting for them to jump out and say, "Ha, I caught you cheating"? It's really about helping them to figure out when to use those tools, when not to use those tools, when they need to develop their sort of foundational knowledge so that they can do ultimately what our employers are always asking us to do. We're student-centered, but we're also, Wentworth Institute of Technology is a very, it's a 4,000 student polytechnic institute focused on co-ops and careers, very much about career readiness. Yeah. So we turn to our employers and say, what do you want our students to know? What do they need to know? And on the question of AI, it's pretty consistent. People in our labor market, employers in our labor market, want to know that students know how to use generative AI mm-hmm. ethically, reliably, and responsibly. Those are three big caveats. But so helping them through that and helping them achieve that is always grounded in that student-centered approach.
Yeah. Very student-centered approach. And what I'm hearing too is going back to that mentorship piece, that as a faculty member and as an educator, someone on a college campus, a colleague on a college university campus, we're also mentoring our students. We're modeling for our students, and we want to model that we trust. that we want to engage, that we want them to be productive members of society. And so we need to model that for them. We know that our students are the heart of our institutions. And so we want our students to thrive. What truly helps that to happen in today's environment?
Well, as the dean, the most important thing that I can do is support faculty. So supporting faculty is the best way to support students, because the relationship between faculty and student is the heart of the whole thing. That's where the mentorship happens. And so in much the same way that we want to support students on their educational journey, I'm very deferential to faculty expertise. And, of course, faculty own the curriculum collectively, and individual faculty members own the syllabus. And as far as I'm concerned, one of my faculty teaching a particular subject, I think, as far as I'm concerned, they're the world's leading expert in teaching that subject to our students. And so they are uniquely positioned in determining, the right pedagogy to use, the right assessments to use, when to use AI, when to use AI. And if I can support them, I think that's the way to support students. Yeah, I think that's it.
I love your answer, and I'm thanking you for that answer. As a past faculty member, I worked for both. I worked for someone who was just like you, very supportive, and what a difference that made in my outlook, in my teaching, in my belief that I could take a risk and possibly make a mistake. I really had someone there that was supporting. I also had someone who was the opposite, and it created a lot of fear. And I didn't feel as creative or innovative, and I held back a little bit. And so I'm just thinking of other faculty members who would really appreciate working for someone who they really knew that they were at the center of everything. Because if you do that, then as a faculty member, I can spend time focused on what I need to have at the center, which is the student. And that goes right back to the issue of values. We, as an organization in academia, we have a list of values that we have on our websites and our mission statements, posted on our wall. They're everywhere. How do we live those? You're supporting faculty, and that's your value, to help students be a success. And the way you do that is supporting it. What are other ways that we live our value so it doesn't become rhetoric?
I appreciate all the points that you just made, and that they really resonate with me. I think as you were talking, I was also thinking to myself that it feels like all of those things have come pretty naturally to me, because I've had great mentors, and I've been really, really lucky to have really wonderful faculty members when I was an undergraduate and a graduate student, and excellent department chairs that, when I was right out of graduate school, they gave me a lot of freedom and a lot of support, and that helped me thrive. Yeah. And I've worked for great, really, really great provosts and presidents who have brought out the best in me. And so I'm grateful for that. So that all comes pretty naturally. And, it's interesting, because when I think about the areas where I've had an impact, I think, I guess we want to have rules and regulations and policies and procedures in the university, but sometimes we need to be human and humane, and there have been times when students have contacted me, years after I taught their course, or years after I met them as an administrator. And the things that they remember are the things where it wasn't just, it wasn't implementing a policy or procedure, but there's a moment of human contact, a human, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but, for example, I was once in a grocery store parking lot, and a former student flagged me, and she's a grown woman, and an older woman, and she, hey, hey, I want to talk to you. And she came over and said, the semester that I took your class, my family, we were going through some pretty profound problems in our lives, and you were so supportive, and it meant so much to me, and it meant so much to my family, and we'll always remember that. So that's like, I think that's something that the educational space can do. Sometimes you never know what people are going to need, and so you need to recognize that while there may be a need for policies and procedures, and we need to adhere to those, and we need to be fair and everything else like that, sometimes you need to recognize that it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
It's not a one size fits all when it comes to the faculty, because different disciplines need different things. It's different types of scholarship and different types of teaching need different things. Different students need different things at different moments. And if you really are a student-centered, a faculty-centered, and a student-centered institution, then sometimes you really kind of have to challenge yourself on what it means to be fair and what it means to be supportive.
Well said. Well said. What I keep hearing is the humanness into humanities, the humanness into, regardless of discipline, is that we're people first. And from having a really great mentor, you've been afforded the opportunity to influence by paying it forward. And this person that flagged you down in the parking lot, you had an impact. You influenced them in some positive way, and they have gone on to pay that forward as well. As a faculty member, I also had several students that, would come in, and, you don't recognize them at times as we age and grow, and they tell you who they are and the impact that you had on their lives. And it really is payday, as I call it. I mean, that's why I got into the profession, is because I wanted to make a difference. And I know that people say that all the time. They want to make a difference. And you can make a difference if we let go of the control, these disruptions that we really don't have control over. But how do we use them as opportunities to influence moving forward? That's what I'm hearing you say. That's what I believe as well. So we are kindred spirits in that. I completely appreciate what you're saying. So let's not ignore some of these broader forces that we know are reshaping higher education right now. Higher education is facing a crossroads, I believe. These fundamental disruptions, from demographic shifts to AI, as you said, these rapid advancing technologies, to the changes in public trust. I heard you mention trust as well. So from your perspective, which disruption or disruptions do you really see as the most urgent right now? Which ones really give us that opportunity for transformation?
Well, a lot of us have been talking about the sort of the 3 or 4 part crisis in higher education that we've been talking about now for literally decades. And so the underlying, the foundation of the crisis has to do with the demographic crisis, the economic crisis, and education funding, the political, socio-political crisis that has to do with eroding public trust, politicization of knowledge and science, and the lack of clarity of mission in institutions. And then the fourth thing has to do with technology. And that has been a slower burn over the decades. But then then we have these moments of amplification where the problems or the challenges become acute, like in the midst of the pandemic. That was not necessarily, I mean, it was disruptive, but it was even more so, it amplified the underlying challenges that exist in higher education at the time. And now the acute challenge that we face right now is Gen AI, all of the things around that. And again, that's an amplifier of the things that if there were problems in higher education, if there are problems in the funding model, if there are problems in the way that we meet the needs of students, if there are problems in a particular lesson, then we can't hide from it anymore. Now it's like AI and everything really like brings it into bold relief and makes that
it's in the forefront now.
Acute. Yeah, it very much is in the forefront. And that's what our faculty conversations, and specifically in the School of Sciences and Humanities at Wentworth, have revolved around for the past 3 years. It's been AI, what does AI mean, and the various iterations until now, like this year, we're just really focused on grading and assessment and how do we know students are making progress toward their goals.
AI is a conversation in every one of my Think Forward podcasts. It comes up in everything. It is at the forefront. There are so many challenging questions that are being asked that a lot of us don't have the answers to, and we don't know where we're going with this. But we know we need to pay attention, we need to dive in, and we need to figure this out in order for us to move forward. So we need to be thinking forward. And I know we'll continue having those conversations as well. I want to shift for a bit. I'd love to bring in your global lens. Your career has taken you not just to Boston, in the New England area, but to the Middle East and to Vietnam. With that global travel, that global learning, you have a perspective, and it's helped to shape your leadership and your views on higher education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've had the incredible privilege of being able to work in different spaces. I spent a few years, in addition to being having various administrative and faculty roles, I also spent a few years as a consultant, based mostly in Dubai, and being in. I think the most important thing is it's about humility. Mm-hmm. That when you are traveling into different cultural spaces in Vietnam, Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, China, various places in Europe that I've worked in a smaller scale, being, not being fluent in the local language, it forces you to appreciate difference, and it sort of destabilizes all the taken for granted things that mm-hmm. you might otherwise have. And so that has imparted me with a lot of humility, which I think, and also curiosity. And those two concepts, and the human, like I guess you pointed out the human focus. So and it's hard to deny that my, all of the comments that I've made so far today really do revolve around that. So I guess that humility and curiosity are amplified through travel or different environments.
I find when I travel, and I've traveled to different places, but it has given me moments to stop and think about how connected we really are, regardless of where we are in the world. We have so much in common that we don't realize at times, and yet we live in different cultures. And I find it fascinating to be able to do just what you said, to stop, to listen, to learn, to be curious. I've learned so much by traveling outside the United States, and I take that with me when I am facilitating or when I am working with leaders in different capacities. And so I do have a great deal of appreciation for what you're talking about. We're going to close here in a little bit, but I want to ask you about the future and some questions that we should be asking leaders and students. So if you could challenge higher education leaders with one question that we should carry forward, what would that be?
I think it would be, what is the next step in student-centered education?
Okay.
And how can we take the next step in, like, what can the future of the classroom look like? As we blur the boundaries between the classroom, the lab, the studio, the office hours. And I think that the way that we deliver education is likely to be very different. So I would ask people, how can we keep pushing in that direction?
Definitely thinking forward. I love that question. So let's bring the student in now. What question do you hope that students should be wrestling with or thinking about long after graduation?
How can I be my best self that's unique to me, in a way that's unique to me, and what capacities do I need to develop? Maybe it may be that with new technology, it's not as important to be the smartest person in the room, or it's not. You don't need to have all the answers, but you should be good at asking the right questions. And how can you develop that skill? And how can you develop your creativity? And how can you develop your communications? And how can you develop your critical information literacy as you go about your journey?
There was a recent report that came out that talked about the most important interpersonal skills for not just leaders, but for our young students, our young leaders that are moving forward in the workforce. And the ones you just mentioned are at the top: creativity, critical thinking, decision making, problem solving, communication, all of that. So I'm really thrilled that that's where you went with it. And you're right, we don't need to have all of the answers. That's why we come together in a very collaborative way to ask the questions and then have open, honest, critical debate about our way forward. So as we wrap up, it's time for this segment that I call Fast Forward. I've just started this and I'm really loving it. And I think a lot of my podcast guests are loving it too. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, really rapid fire questions. So go with your first thought. Okay, we ready?
Sure.
In one word, what does it mean to be an educated person today?
Curiosity.
What's one thing every campus could do tomorrow to help more students thrive?
Um, Help establish opportunities for students to see themselves as part of something bigger.
Ooh. What's the best leadership advice you've ever received and you return to again and again?
I'm sorry, I'm not fast enough here. Let's see. How about listen?
Yeah. Can I share mine really quick?
Sure. Yes, please. Yeah.
Mine was just be Rose.
Yeah.
All around authenticity. Okay, back to you now.
Okay.
What disruption excites you most about the future of higher education?
The shift in assessing what students learn, from moving away from the credit-based grades toward thinking about not only competencies, but like, how do we help students develop certain skills so that they can do things? It's not about what do you know, but what can you do? And
what do you do with it?
And then so there's some interesting discussion happening in space.
Oh, I wish we could dive deeper into that. What's one book, habit, practice that keeps you grounded as a leader?
Um, um, Learning new things, just always trying to learn new things.
Yeah. Thank you for playing along with me on that,
Yeah.
Matt. That was fast forward. And it's really a great reminder that even rapid fire answers can spark deeper reflection where higher education is headed. So, as I'm reflecting on this conversation, I'm struck by your journey and how it does remind us all that higher education has a deep purpose. It's not simply about degrees or credentials. It's about preparing people, as you said, that for the lives of meaning and impact and what they're going to do as they move forward. But yes, our sector does face true disruption. But disruption, I believe, can be an invitation to reimagine what it means to be educated today, to create conditions where students can thrive, and also to ensure that our institutions remain a catalyst for opportunity of growth and for thriving in our communities. If you're listening to this, you are part of that reimagining. Whether you're leading a department, teaching in a classroom, serving students, or shaping policy, please know that you hold the power to make higher education not just relevant, but transformative. So as you return to work, ask yourself this question: how can we, as higher education leaders, how can we honor our traditions while embracing the transformation that our students and society need? This is Think Forward with Rose. Thad, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
You've
you.
helped us think forward where tradition meets transformation and where leaders shape the future. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.